Marie Bartholdi over here in the Tournament Center with Paul Cheon, Draft Archetype Builder. Vampires. Okay, so let's take a look at overall vampire strategy, something we're familiar with. Of course, they've got a lot of small creatures. They go wide. They're able to use their your life total as a resource, and they're very good at racing. So this is what they were doing in Ixalan. Is this still what we're doing in Rivals?
Yeah, so I think Vampires is actually the tribe that's aged the best with Rivals. I think it's still considered one of the strongest tribes. It might actually be the strongest tribe, given that I think Merfolk has actually gotten a lot weaker. Again, there's still a lot of life gain here. You have Martyr of Dusk, you make lifelink tokens, and there's lots of ways to actually just kind of pump up your tokens. And one of the best cards actually in the Vampire archetype is an Aura, Squire's Devotion, which not only makes a vampire, but also gives your creatures lifelink. All
right, well, let's take a look at what we're used to. So this is basically basic Ixalan Vampires deck. You've got your 2 copies of Vampire Zeal. You've got your 2 Anointed Deacons. There's your Call to the Feast of Pious Interdiction. Just a solid Vampires list.
And just a little
Sanctum Seeker.
Yeah,
that's
you can
my
still
boy
get
right
one.
there.
There's only 1 pack left. But yeah, if you notice, Vampire is just a very, very nice curve. You have lots of great cheap combat tricks. You still have good combat trick available to you in the next set as well with Moment of Triumph. But yeah, I think, you know, this is just kind of what you would expect. Good mana curve. You have the life gain
heavy
with the Bishop Soldiers, lots of 2-drops, and then you want to curve out. If you're super fortunate, you can maybe pick up a Sanctum Seeker. But of course, you know, these small creatures, you know, you want them to trade favorably in the late game. And because there's 3 packs, you have access to lots of copies of Anointed Deacon. That's one thing that you kind of miss once you move into Rivals of Ixalan. And then I guess you need some fillers over here at the top.
Yeah, the Skyblade of the Legion, I want to point out, is a card that's gone down quite heavily because you have fewer Anointed Deacon chances.
Right. Before, you're just like, you know, this is a you know, decent cheap card that can kind of do a good job blocking, but kind of in the late game, you do have the Anointed Deacons, and getting 3 in the air is really nice, but you now kind of lose out on that. But still think Vampires is pretty strong with the existence of Rivals.
All right, well, let's take a look at building a Vampires deck in Rivals. We're going to kick things off here at 1 with Vampire Zeal and Moment of Triumph. Are you still going to want Zeal over Triumph? How do you feel?
So I think most of the time I do prefer Vampire Zeal over Moment of Triumph. I think the first strike is very relevant in a lot of situations, especially if you're vampires. But Moment of Triumph is not even necessarily a downgrade because, you know, there are a lot of aggressive decks that people are still trying to play. You have, of course, the Pirate decks with the Kitesail Coursers and the Goblin Trailblazers, and the gaining 2 life is not irrelevant. That's the one thing that's so amazing about the Vampires deck, is that it's good against other aggressive decks because you have so many incidental ways to gain life.
If you have a Famished Paladin, it's pretty nice as well.
Oh yeah, I love me a Famished Paladin. Just every time I get to figure out ways to untap it, it's like a little riddle, like a little clue, like, what did I do? What did I do? Oh, untap. But Famished Paladin, I think, still just a good card no matter what. It's still a 2-mana 3/3.
Well, let's see if we picked any up in this draft. Take a look at our 2-drop slot here. Legion Lieutenant, of course, the hallmark card that we got with the addition of Rivals.
Yeah, so when you look at the 2-drops here, you kind of compare it back to the cards in Ixalan. I think you do get actually improvements here in the 2-mana slot because you have, of course, access to the payoff in the Legion Lieutenant, one of the hallmarks. We actually saw a couple of that go around in the draft earlier, but yeah, very, very strong card. And part of the reason why I really, really like Vampires is I really love the 2-drops that you can play in the Vampire deck. Dusk Legion Zealot is just a card that I like having in any deck, and of course with the synergies that you get from Vampires, it's even better there. Same thing with Martyr of Dusk. Both of these cards, you know, a lot of times when you see tribal cards, the value goes up because they're a certain creature type, but with both Martyr of Dusk and Dusk Legion Zealot, just in a vacuum, they're just good cards to have, which is why I really like just kind of the 2-mana creatures that you get out of the Vampires deck.
Well, let's take a look at our 3-mana creatures and see what we have here. And now, this was kind of one of the big stories, was the reprint of Legion Conquistador, which was very smart, I think, on the part of R&D. And you can see we've got 3 in this draft.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, Paul.
But it's kind of funny how we have 3 Legion Conquistadors in this draft deck, but in Triple Ixalan somehow we... no, but yes, this was a really heads-up decision here because you have access to the Legion Conquistadors, and I think even towards the end of Ixalan, its stock just continued to rise because when you first look at it, you're like, yeah, 3-mana 2/3, that's a pretty bad rate. But when you have 3 in your deck, it's pretty nice, especially, you know, in conjunction with the payoff cards like the Legion Lieutenant and cards like the Anointed Deacon. Moving on, also, the 3-mana portion of the curve is also amazing for the Vampire deck. You have Exultant Sky Marcher, 3-mana 2/3. That's just a really, really strong rate, and you don't actually see it all that often in Limited these days. Just a 3-mana 2/3 flyer, and the fact that it has, and again, that's a card that you would put in any deck, but it being a vampire is super relevant once we get to kind of higher up on the curve. And Forerunner of the Legion has been absolutely amazing. Just the ability to just make sure you smooth out your draws, and if you have some rare vampires to get, it can be pretty good. Very good combo with Maverick Fane.
Yeah, Paul got me with that the other night. That's why he's smiling,
no big deal.
everybody.
And then, of course, Squire's Devotion, actually just one of my favorite cards. You know, in Ixalan, a lot of people were saying how good Mark of the Vampire was. They're like, this card just continued to impress me. It's overperformed. Well, I think this is just a better version of that card, because even if they kill the creature that has a Squire's Devotion on it, you still get a vampire out of the deal. Not only that, it costs 1 mana less.
And you're going wide, which is something the vampires want to do anyway. Well, let's take a look at our 4-drop slot. How important is this slot for vampires? We've got some premium removal here in Impale, little less good but still serviceable Divine Verdict, and a rare in Elenda the Dusk Rose.
So yeah, this is just a common theme that you're going to see with the addition of Rivals of Ixalan. I think there's the removal is just considered to be better across the board. Cards like Luminous Bonds. In black, you have basically the 2 of the best commons in the set are both removal spells in the Moment of Craving and the Impale. It's still controversial. I've talked to a lot of different people, not sure which one you take over.
Better?
Exactly.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's very, very close. Because Moment of Craving early on, it just gets all those evasive creatures, but Impale is also quite strong. Moving on here, we have one of the payoff cards, Sanguine Glorifier. This is actually just a really strong card, because if you are vampires, you have just lots of creatures to kind of put that +1/+1 counter on. And if you do that for 4 mana at common, you're effectively getting 4 power and 4 toughness worth of stats, which is kind of above rate just in general. And you know, I love just playing like a turn 3 Exultant Sky Marcher into turn 4 Sanguine Glorifier, for example. And Elenda the Dusk Rose, I mean, mythic rare vampire, does it all. Just make sure that anytime you have trades, anytime you use your removal spells, this thing just kind of threatens to take over the game.
All right, let's round things off here at our 5-drop slot. Well, we managed to get 1 Anointed Deacon. That's pretty good, but we got a really great card here, Champion of Dusk, and of course some more removal and contract killing.
Yeah, so if you notice, like, the payoff cards are still around in Rivals of Ixalan. We have cards like Elenda the Dusk Rose. I mean, we might not have a pack of Anointed Deacon, but we still have cards like Sanguine Glorifier, which are still very, very strong. And if you notice, just across the curve, look at the mana curve.
Yeah.
I love my 2-drops out of Rivals of Ixalan. I love my 3-drops. Legion Conquistador, you get in both packs, and then you go up to 4. This was kind of a hole that you had before, right? You didn't have a card as good as Sanguine Glorifier when you were in triple Ixalan, and then you go up, and now you can get the Anointed Deacon. So that's kind of why, like, personally, I've had the most success drafting this archetype, because you always just have a very consistent deck, just kind of throughout the curve. And of course, if you're a little bit fortunate, you can also pick up the payoff cards like the Champion of Dusk.
Vampires, great deck. Really interesting to see the comparison between Ixalan and Rivals of Ixalan, one of my personal favorites to draft. Well, we have more Magic coming up in just a second. We're going to take a look at some ads, and then round 10.